Hi everybody, I'm Dr. John Douillard. Welcome to LifeSpa.com, and today I want to talk about something we call in Ayurveda weight balancing. And it definitely is something that maybe is called these days intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating. And Ayurveda was sort of all over the idea that we shouldn't eat as much as we do. You know, one study or one Ayurvedic kind of very famous saying is that that yogis eat one meal a day and bogis eat 2 meals a day, which is working class people who are physically doing labor who need more food, right? And then people who eat 3 meals a day are called rogis, which are people who are mostly dead in a hospital. They don't even have a name for people who eat 3, 4, and 5, 6 meals or snacks a day, because you're mostly dead at 3, right? So the idea that's obviously trending in the research is that we should be eating less food, or definitely eating less frequently. So I want to talk about something we call weight balancing in Ayurveda. And it has a lot to do with just more than just, from the Ayurvedic perspective, more than just saying, okay, let's just, eat within a 8-hour window, whenever that window might be, or a 10-hour window, and have the rest of the time of the day fasting, which obviously does work and there's good science behind it, but it doesn't seem to recognize the circadian rhythms of nature. So back in the year 2000, when my book, The 3-Season Diet, came out, we did a study back in Denver at a big yoga studio. We had a bunch of people sign up to do this study. We called it a weight balancing study, where we had people eat a breakfast and a lunch and a supper with no snacks. And then eventually, if they could have a breakfast and a lunch with no snacks successfully, they would skip or reduce their supper. And so we did that for it was about a 6-week study. And we watched and we published it, and at the link in this, associated with this article, is a video with a link to that study. You can look at the research. And we found that initially when people were asked to eat a breakfast, a lunch, a supper with no snacks, they sort of freaked out, because they were constantly used to having their meal and a snack and a meal and a snack and a meal and a snack. And when you eat a meal and a snack and a meal and a snack, you're going to burn as fuel the meal and the snack, the meal and the snack, and the meal and the snack. But when we actually had them go from a breakfast to lunch with no snacks, they had to burn fat in between. They have lunch to supper, they had to burn fat in between, and from supper to breakfast, they had to burn fat in between. So once they got over this hump of feeling terrible because they weren't getting their snack, they started feeling fantastic. In fact, we measured their anxiety, their depression, their exhaustion, their fatigue, and fatigue after work, their sleep efficiency, and all of them were improved, and they lost 1.2 pounds per week during the entire study, which is really neat because the whole thing just balanced. And what was really neat is that most of the folks halfway through the study said, hey, I'm having a really good lunch, a good breakfast, and a really big lunch. I don't really feel like I even need dinner. Do I have to eat it? And we're like, no, it's part of the deal. You can absolutely not eat dinner, because supper is a supplemental meal. Comes from the word soup, or supplemental. So if you have a good breakfast and a good lunch and no supper, you're going to burn fat from lunch all the way till breakfast the very next day, which is really the best way to do it. And then you force the body into fat metabolism while you're sleeping. And fat is a long-lasting source of energy, so it doesn't wake you up. If you're used to eating a meal and a snack and a meal and a snack because you burn mostly sugar, then you try to go to bed for 8 hours, your body's going to go, wait. I have a feeding schedule. I eat every 2 hours. How am I supposed to sleep through the night at 8 hours without getting fed? But if you've trained the body to be a fat burner, the fat's going to allow you to sleep throughout the night. In fact, that's what the word breakfast comes from, breaking the fast. And studies show that humans are supposed to burn exclusively fat throughout the night. But that's not what happens to most folks who don't sleep well, because they're used to eating a meal and a snack and a meal and a snack. Then they try to go to bed and sleep for 8 hours, but they wake up because they're actually, having a blood sugar low, and that kind of wakes them up, which is sort of, kind of really interesting. So it's a beautiful, simple way, sort of the original intermittent fasting kind of an idea. And the plan that we laid out in the study was very, very simple. And I don't suggest that people just say, I'm just going to stop eating my dinner, even though the circadian clocks, and that's the difference between just having, a breakfast and a lunch and no dinner, or skipping breakfast and then having a lunch and a supper. The science shows that we actually are designed to digest our food during the daytime. So studies show people eat a breakfast and a lunch, same number of calories as people who eat a lunch and a supper. The people who ate a breakfast and lunch, same calories, lost significantly more weight, and their metabolic activity was significantly better than people who ate the lunch and the supper, same number of calories. And there's so many studies now emerging saying we have biological clocks. They're tied to nature's circadian rhythms, and when you're in sync with them, you kind of are hungry in the morning, and that's what starts your metabolic activity for the day. People who eat breakfast across the board, I wrote an article about the science behind this, they generally have significantly less type 2 diabetes than people who skip breakfast. So in the name of losing weight, to just skip breakfast and have lunch and dinner against the circadian clocks, yeah, you can bang out some weight loss, which is great for a short time, but in the long term, we want to be thinking about how to align ourselves with those circadian rhythms. That's the difference between Ayurveda and just sort of doing the thing that sort of like manipulates my body to get that result that I want, but maybe in the long run, not actually having, the benefit and the long-term health gains that we really, really want to have. So the program is really simple. You have I don't suggest to just start out skipping your supper, because that can be really hard for folks. So start out having your 3 meals a day with no snacks and see how that goes. 3 meals a day, breakfast to lunch, no snack, lunch to supper, no snack, supper to breakfast, no snack. If you have an almond between breakfast and lunch, you're going to burn the almond as opposed to your fat. If you have an apple between lunch and supper, you're going to burn the apple instead of your fat. So we're trying to reset fat burning. And guess what? This is the springtime as we make this video. This is the time where, if you look at what's coming out of the ground in terms of the harvest in March, late winter, early spring, there's very, very little, if anything. The deer are going to dig up some roots, maybe some early spring greens, maybe some hunting, but basically the food that is austere. It's the natural time of calorie restriction, natural time of intermittent fasting, and the natural time of fasting, in fact. So this is when we would see the fastings and the vision quests in Native American culture, and the Lent and Ramadan, and all these religious times where people would actually fast. Part of it was tied to nature because there was no food, really limited harvest, so it was a very austere time. Our fall-winter reserves are running low, and now we're forced to burn our own fat as fuel, and that's what flips us into a natural fat-burning state, which is kind of a really cool thing. So you go from 3 meals with no snacks, then you transition from there to having a lighter supper. So let's have a breakfast and a lunch, and then have a soup or a salad for supper. And then if you can do that successfully and there's no problem, then you can shift to the next level, which is to make your supper a little bit earlier, which is a breakfast and a lunch, and then an earlier supper before 6 o'clock. So we're sort of nudging the body to be able to and willing to burn fat gracefully and naturally. And after you can have that, where you have first 3 meals a day, no snacks, if that's good, then a lighter supper, soup and a salad, and if that's okay, no craving and bonking and feeling terrible, then you go into an earlier supper before 6 o'clock, and when that's okay, that's when you just skip supper completely. You try to have maybe your lunch a little bit later, perhaps. That'll hedge your bet, and then you can have, sort of nothing except for some water, maybe some non-caffeinated herbal tea with no sweetener in the evening that you can sip on, and you can stay in fat metabolism that way and start losing significant amount of weight, which is not about weight loss. It's about doing what nature intended this time of the year, which is to reset your fat burners. This spring, we have bugs in our gut that are designed to burn fat. In the fall, we have bugs in our gut that are designed to burn starches and carbohydrates, because that's when they're harvested. So this is the time of the year we need to reset those fat burners. That means calorie restriction, eating less. Definitely one of the ways to do that is by skipping a meal, which would be supper. That doesn't mean you have to skip dinner for the rest of your life, because you're going to significantly calorie restrict with just 2 meals a day. And you might feel like once you lose that weight or get the weight, the balance and the benefits that you want, you can go back to having a lighter supplemental supper. Remember, the word supper comes from soup or supplemental. So that is usually an okay way to go. So there you have it. It's an article associated with this video. It gives a link to my study. It gives you, worksheets and guidelines to help you guide you through a weight balancing plan for this spring. Really super easy. Check it out. at LifeSpa.com. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. John Douillard.